Previously, we have discussed the concept of variation, where we can see even within the same species, there are many differences between each of the individual. Now, we will look into the concept of selection and how the different variety of characteristics or phenotype in a species plays an important role in the process of selection. So what is selection? A selection is a process whereby one or more factors acting on various phenotypes. So various phenotypes refer to the variation within a species in a particular population, will result in differential mortality and reproductive success of that particular species of a population. So maksudnya selection ni adalah satu proses di mana akan ada faktor yang akan menyebabkan kenapa only a few varieties yang ada di dalam setiap satu species untuk setiap satu population tersebut boleh mempunyai different level of survival and ability to reproduce. So that is selection. There are two types of selection, natural selection as well as artificial selection. So first, natural selection. What is natural selection? It's a mechanism of evolution caused by environmental pressure. Tadi kita dah discuss the concept of selection, iaitu ada faktor yang akan act on different phenotypes. So for natural selection, faktor tersebut merujuk kepada environmental pressure, iaitu pressure yang wujud di dalam environment. Ada pelbagai jenis faktor yang kita categorize as environmental pressure. For example, food resources ataupun competition within a population ataupun competition between population ataupun accumulation of toxic waste, and even natural disaster pun can be considered as environmental pressure. So, this factor yang kita panggil sebagai environmental pressure akan menyebabkan berlakunya evolution within a species of a population. Next, macam mana environmental pressure can lead to evolution yang kita panggil sebagai natural selection, iaitu dengan the individual with advantageous phenotype will survive and reproduce, while others will have lesser chances of survival and reproduction. Means that dalam satu population of a species tadi akan ada banyak variation. Maksudnya akan ada banyak karakteristik yang berbeza untuk species yang sama. So under the concept of natural selection, only individual that have advantageous phenotype will be able to survive and reproduce. Manakala phenotype lain, walaupun daripada species yang sama, tetapi kalau phenotype tersebut tidak menyebabkan organism itu boleh survive dan reproduce, phenotype tersebut akan makin lama makin sikit dia punya chances of survival dan juga reproduction. So that is how environmental pressure can lead to evolution of a species within a population yang kita panggil sebagai natural selection. So what is the importance of natural selection? So because of natural selection, individuals will become more adapted to the environment sebab dia ada advantageous phenotype tadi yang sesuai untuk hidup dekat dalam environment tersebut. Next, the advantageous phenotype can be passed to the next generation sebab organism yang ada advantageous phenotype tersebut boleh reproduce. So it will pass the gene for that particular phenotype to the next generation. So untuk gene yang code for character yang less advantageous, it will not be passed to the next generation. So lama-lama allele tersebut makin lama makin sikit dalam population. Consequently, over time, natural selection will lead to changes in the allele frequency as well as the genotype frequency of a population. So macam mana allele tu berubah, iaitu the frequency of advantageous allele will increase but the frequency of the disadvantageous allele will decrease. There are three types of natural selection. First is stabilizing selection, second is directional selection, and third is disruptive selection. So natural selection can occur by three main characteristics, either secara stabilizing ataupun directional ataupun disruptive. Kat sini kita nampak graf yang menunjukkan frequency of allele untuk setiap phenotype. So paksi Y adalah frequency of allele, paksi X adalah phenotype. So in the original population, kita nampak untuk phenotype yang berada dekat minimum extreme, frekuensi dia rendah, dekat maximum extreme, frekuensi dia pun rendah, and then there are lots of allele frequency untuk intermediate phenotype. So itu untuk original population. But following natural selection, iaitu secara stabilizing selection, we can see that the population after natural selection yang kalau merah ni, frequency of allele dia akan fokus kepada intermediate phenotype sahaja. So allele frekuensi untuk minimum phenotype dan juga maximum extreme phenotype, jumlah dia decrease very rapidly. So dia akan concentrated dekat tengah-tengah, iaitu dekat intermediate phenotype. So ini kita panggil sebagai stabilizing phenotype. For example, robins ataupun burung typically lay 4 eggs. Burung robin ni boleh menghasilkan 4 telur pada satu masa. So, in the case of stabilizing selection, larger clutches may result in malnourished chicks. Maksudnya, kalau robin ni lay more than 4 eggs, dia akan menyebabkan chicks yang lahir tu nanti, anak burung yang lahir tu nanti akan kekurangan nutrien sebab terlampau banyak telur yang dia hasilkan. At the same time, kalau robin itu lay less than 4 eggs, kurang daripada 4 telur, dia boleh reduce the chances of survival sebab semakin kurang telur, semakin kuranglah anak burung yang akan dilahirkan dan kurang chances of anak burung itu untuk survive sampai adulthood. So kat sini kita nampak kalau telur sikit sangat dihasilkan akan reduce chances of survival. Kalau telur banyak sangat dihasilkan pun akan reduce chances of survival. Sebab tu kita nampak dalam new population after natural selection, both of the extreme phenotype decrease in frequency. Tetapi yang intermediate phenotype akan increase in their frequency in the population. Sebab tu graf tu akan meningkat. So ini kita nampak the concept of stabilizing selection, iaitu natural selection will select for intermediate phenotype, menyebabkan allele in the intermediate phenotype to increase in frequency. At the same time, natural selection will select against both extreme phenotype, iaitu phenotype yang akan melahirkan less than 4 eggs dan juga more than 4 eggs. So that is stabilizing selection. Next, directional selection. So in directional selection, following natural selection, the frequency of one extreme phenotype will be selected for. So the other extreme will be selected against. Maksudnya salah satu extreme phenotype yang akan increase frequency. The other extreme, satu lagi extreme yang lain akan decrease in their frequency. For example, kat sini kita nampak untuk peppered moth ataupun duck moth population. So in the original population, frequency of the peppered moth adalah paling tinggi. Tetapi frekuensi untuk duck moth, kupu-kupu yang berwarna gelap ini, frekuensi dia rendah. Yang peppered ni, iaitu campuran hitam putih tu yang ada banyak in the population for the original population. Tetapi after natural selection secara directional, kita nampak frekuensi of the peppered moth reduces, tetapi frekuensi untuk yang dark coloured akan increase. So kenapa boleh berubah macam ni? Iaitu daripada satu extreme beranjak ke the other extreme. So the reason for this is because of the environmental pressure. yang leads to natural selection to takes place. So pressure itu in this example merujuk kepada the change in the environment because of industrial revolution. So during industrial revolution sudah ada banyak kilang yang akan starts to produce jelaga, iaitu soot. So jelaga itu akan deposit on tree trunk, dekat pokok-pokok, dekat batang pokok akan ada banyak jelaga, menyebabkan batang pokok menjadi gelap. So because of the soot being deposited on the tree trunk menyebabkan batang pokok tu menjadi gelap. So moth yang berkala gelap ini akan better camouflage against the sooty environment. So pemangsa akan susah nak cari dark coloured moth sebab dia akan blend in with the dark environment, jelaga-jelaga yang deposited on the surface of the tree trunk. So oleh kerana pemangsa predator susah nak cari dark coloured moth, so frequency of the dark coloured moth akan increase. Tetapi untuk yang light coloured ataupun peppered yang ada campuran hitam putih ni, frekuensi dia akan decrease sebab dia akan stand out. Dia tak boleh nak camouflage. Environment dia gelap tapi dia colour putih. So dia akan nampak. So predator senang nak cari yang light coloured peppered moth. Hence result in decrease in their frequency within the population. So kat situ kita nampak change in the environment yang kita panggil sebagai environmental pressure. So in this case, industrial revolution yang menyebabkan deposition of soot on the tree trunk will leads to directional selection, iaitu daripada high frequency of light coloured peppered moth to high frequency of dark coloured peppered moth. So daripada satu ekstrim dia beranjak to the other extreme. So itu adalah directional selection. So again, because of natural selection, kita boleh nampak frequency of advantageous allele akan bertambah, frequency of disadvantageous allele akan berkurang. Next, disruptive selection. So in disruptive selection, natural selection will cause both extreme phenotype to increase in number. Yang intermediate tu yang akan decrease in number. Kenapa? Sebab both extreme phenotype has higher chances of survival compared to the intermediate phenotype when there is change in the environment. In this example, kita boleh nampak rabbit population yang ada grey coat, bulu yang color grey, ataupun bulu yang kita panggil sebagai color Himalayan. Himalayan maksudnya bulu dia ada grey dan juga white campuran. So this is Himalayan. So the Himalayan as well as the grey coat rabbit has higher chances of survival compared to the white coat rabbit. Kenapa? Sebab white ini akan less able to camouflage with its environment. So dia akan senang untuk dicari oleh predator seperti helang. As a result, the white coat rabbit has lower chances of survival in that environment. That's why frekuensi dia akan berkurang. Tetapi mana-mana yang ada color gelap iaitu grey ataupun Himalayan ada higher chances of survival sebab mereka boleh camouflage in the environment. So itu adalah disruptive selection. So in conclusion, we can see that tak kisahlah stabilizing ke, directional ke, disruptive ke, natural selection, the concept is it will causes increase in frequency of any phenotype that will increase chances of their survival. Mana-mana phenotype yang boleh menyebabkan organism itu boleh survive dan boleh reproduce, itulah yang akan increase in frequency. So that particular phenotype kita panggil sebagai advantageous phenotype. So mana-mana phenotype yang reduce chances of survival, reduce chances of reproduction akan decrease in frequency in the next generation. So when natural selection doing its thing, so there are three different patterns of outcome. Sama ada stabilizing iaitu intermediate phenotype yang akan increase ataupun directional, salah satu extreme phenotype yang akan increase ataupun disruptive, iaitu dua-dua extreme phenotype yang akan increase. So itu adalah natural selection. Next, artificial selection. So, unlike natural selection, artificial selection is a mechanism of evolution caused by human. Kalau tadi selection pressure itu by environment, natural environment, untuk natural selection, but for artificial selection, the selection pressure, faktor yang menyebabkan berlakunya evolution adalah human. So how do human involved in artificial selection is by carrying out selective breeding on organism showing desired characteristic. So the key point is desired characteristic. So maksudnya, kenapa certain phenotype will increase frequency adalah sebab that particular phenotype is desired by human. Bukan sebab karakter tersebut ada higher chance of survival. Tak ada kaitan dengan survival ataupun reproduction. Semuanya because of karakter tersebut mempunyai benefit kepada human. So as a result, artificial selection will produce new breeds of organism that is only useful to human for specific purposes. So in the end, this will also lead to change in the allele and genotype frequency in the population. Cuma, the way that the allele or the genotype frequency changes is because of it is advantageous to human. It's nothing to do with whether the allele is advantageous or disadvantageous. There are two types of artificial selection. The first one is inbreeding. The second one is outbreeding. So inbreeding adalah when human breed closely related species, but outbreeding is when human breed distantly related species. For example, kat sini kita nampak macam mana human buat inbreeding and outbreeding untuk create satu jenis jagung yang akan resistant to 3 different types of disease at the same time. So kita start dengan satu species of jagung that only resistant to disease A and B, and then another species that is resistant to disease C. So untuk make sure plant tersebut continue to become resistant to disease A and B, kita akan buat inbreeding. Maksudnya kita kacukkan organism of the same species so that it will become inbred and continue to be resistant to disease A and disease B. Tetapi inbreeding will leads to problem. For example, they are not thriving because of inbreeding. Sama juga, kalau kita nak kekalkan corn yang kedua ni untuk continue to be resistant to disease C, kita pun akan buat inbreeding. Tetapi the same consequences will emerge, iaitu they will not thrive. So what we can do is kita akan kacukkan, outbreedkan, inbred this species and inbred for this species. As a result, kita akan dapat another different species that will become resistant to all 3 different diseases. And this species yang boleh hidup, boleh thrive in the environment. So, kita sudah dapat satu species baru yang ada karakteristik yang kita nak. This is an example of artificial selection where human create a new species by doing inbreeding as well as outbreeding. So another example of artificial selection but for animals, kasi kita nampak ada 3 different species of animals. So what human did is dia akan kacukkan 2 different species ini, iaitu secara outbreeding. So the process of outbreeding will result in a different species, iaitu Santa Gertrudis, which will have both of the desired characteristic of the original 2 species, iaitu ada good beef as well as resistance to heat. So kat sini kita boleh nampak, kalau natural selection tadi, the main purpose of natural selection is to increase frequency of advantageous allele. Tetapi in artificial selection, Tak ada kaitan dengan advantages ke disadvantages. Semuanya depends on beneficial tak kepada human. So itu adalah artificial versus natural selection.